to share the readings for this gathering time. Randy?
Yep. The readings this morning focus on the concept of reverence and offer several of the many ways it can be experienced. The first reading is a statement by Thomas Steinbeck, a screenwriter, photographer, journalist, and fiction writer. He is the elder son of John Steinbeck, the author of Grapes of Wrath and of Mice and Men. My father, John Steinbeck, was a man who held human history in great reverence, and in particular, the biographies of those people who had risked their lives, their fortunes, and their worldly honor to defend the rights and the prerogatives of those who were powerless to defend themselves. The second reading is from the work of Richard Powers, an American novelist and professor of English who explores the effects that modern science and technology have on ordinary people. He has won a National Book Award and a Pulitzer Prize for his work in fiction. His major novel, Overstory, is about 5 trees and 9 people who, together, address the problem of the destruction of forests. Powers was inspired to write the novel after he saw a forest of giant redwood trees for the first time. Science is not about control. It's about cultivating a perpetual condition of wonder in the face of something that forever grows one step richer and subtler than our latest theory about it. It is about reverence, not magistry. Scott?
I am going to now introduce Randy as the voice of Albert Schweitzer, a very famous person, a physician, a philosopher, a theologian. And for a long, long time, well, first of all, he decided that he was criticizing civilization too much and he wasn't studying it in order to help it. And so he kept thinking, how do we bring out the goodness in people? How do we connect that to something that matters for people? And he went through every philosophy and every understanding of that to try and connect goodness with life. And that's very much what his work has influenced us as we put together Vision Works in the past, that how to connect that so that it sat right with him, so that he could connect those ideas well. And he was frustrated all the time. And Randy's now going to read from his work about when he figured it out.
In that mental state, I had to take a long journey up the river. Lost in thought, I sat on the deck of the barge, struggling to find the elementary and universal concept of the ethical that I had not discovered in any philosophy. I covered sheet after sheet with discontinued sentences, merely to concentrate on the problem. 2 days passed. Late on the third, and at the very moment when at sunset we were making our way through a herd of hippopotamuses, there was a flash upon my mind, unforeseen and unsought, the phrase, reverence for life. The iron door had yielded. The path in the thickets had become visible. I had found my way to the principle in which affirmation of the world and ethics are joined together. Offered as wisdom for the journey.
Here we walk in its light.
Thank you, Randy. When I sent the readings to Randy, knowing his love of nature, I had a feeling he would enjoy the hippopotamuses. Schweitzer was traveling down a river in Gabon, and I might be saying that incorrectly, Gabon, doing some exploration, and he wasn't even in the philosophical mood, and it was looking at nature that made him connect those ideas for the reverence of life. And so I turned to this topic, which is huge, and it's been so widely written about. But I hope that by the end of his thinking together like this, we can use it as a more active impulse in our life, the idea of reverence. And so Peter's going to put on what has been called a deck of slides, and we'll go through them together. Those of you that are on phones, I'm going to be reading the slide, and I'll try to read it in a way that isn't rushed and that you can take it in. I encourage you to come on the screen if you want to see them, because it's a little easier to take these words in. But the next, so I'm going to say next, and Peter changes to the next slide. So, well, I sort of said that, but it was in a sentence. But now, next, yeah. I miss Peter. I miss looking at Peter at the back of the church here, because we have whole secret ways of communicating during a perspective. But thanks, Peter. So first of all, just some definition kind of things. And this may be a familiar idea to you. It may be new. It may be an idea you dropped long ago because it was too religious for you. Or it may be a word you've kept with you because there's a religious aspect in you that's still alive, or that always was and is really important to you. So when I'm asking us to look at it from a natural point of view, let's look at it from a natural point of view. And in many of I read journal articles and definitions and even Wikipedia, and gathered these thoughts together. So reverence, a feeling or attitude of deep respect, tinged with awe, with veneration. The meaning is to revere. You see the word in the word reverence, to revere. I like the idea of tinged with awe. Tinged with awe. Have you been tinged with awe lately? I hope so. It's a big thing, and because it's a big thing, the next part, reverence involves a humbling of the self in respectful recognition of something perceived to be greater than the self. It involves a humbling of the self in respectful recognition of something perceived to be greater than the self. Now, I was thinking, if you don't perceive anything to be greater than you, you probably won't feel any reverence at all, or maybe just for yourself. But I'm kind of hoping that's not the case for anybody, although we may have moments of it, passing fancies of being the greatest. But the humbling looks like that, in those words, something that happens to you in the presence of, or in the thought of, something perceived to be greater than just you. And there's a lot of words that are related to this. And I picked out one for Peter next. The sublime. It's not a word we use. It's in some songs because it rhymes with things that are hard to rhyme. But the idea of sublimity, of sublime, and the words that were gathered into there was feelings or experiences of beauty. And you may have felt that looking at spring coming back is beautiful. So that would be sublime. Something of admiration, of astonishment, coming across something you didn't know was there, and it was gorgeous or beautiful or wonderful. Respect, wonder, we use that word a lot, delight, and even euphoria, which means you were kind of overwhelmed with how beautiful that was. That's sublime. The word I want to spend a little more time with is the next slide, is the word awe. When I was a teenager, was in a very old Baptist church, very, very old. And it had very, very old choir music in a secret cabinet at the back. And I knew every inch of that church inside out and backwards. How many of you in any part of your life were a member of or attended an old building as a church? And there were secret passageways, right? And you thought that was the most wonderful thing in the world. I spent a lot of time in the organ pipe loft, looking at all the pipes and just sitting there feeling. But the choir music was kept in a secret passageway. And when I was there by myself, I opened it up and I saw all this old music. And one of the ones I pulled out said, "We praise and revere our awful God." And I remember thinking, well, that's a very strange thing to say about your God, awful. And I asked someone in the church, and they kind of chuckled and said, of course, the word awe didn't always mean what we think awful means. Full of awe. We praise our full of awe God, our awesome God. Now, a lot of contemporary praise music will say our awesome God, but in the older language, it was our awful God, full of awe. And the idea of awe, and I put in little words there, awestruck, to be awestruck. And here's the words: an overwhelming sensitivity to greatness, being filled with amazement or terror Now, how many of you grew up in Sunday school or grew up in a particular way of looking at religion? And there was the idea of fearing God or fearing the tremendous power. So amazement or terror could be awe, in awe of a hurricane, in awe of a glacier, in awe of what's happening with hurricanes and glaciers. And another thought is the awareness of the potential of being powerfully influenced by whatever you're looking at or thinking about. And that's either positively or negatively. And that's where that awesome idea of a storm. Those hurricane chasers, I hope none of you actually are one, but they actually go right into the storm fearlessly and actually bring us pictures that somehow or other we are actually interested in looking at. So we understand that fear, so something so big that we think it's going to affect us or other people very positively or very negatively. Next slide takes us to the Oxford Dictionary, the Oxford English Dictionary. And evidently the word awe comes from the Old English and then back to the Old Norse, which of course combined with the Danes and all the Norman influence from France as well. And all these languages blended there. And so in the Old English and the Old Norse, the word awe means fear and dread. Now we use the word dreadful rather lightly sometimes, but dread, fearful submission to power. And that word carried on in a lot of the English language, that it was something so big that we were in awe of, that we were afraid of what it might do to us or for us or with us. We could also do something about that by propitiating, by pleasing those forces and making it swing a little more to the positive. Okay, the next slide is English proceeded to develop that word as, of course, all these words, all our words went through. So then it became dread mingled with veneration, something that we were respecting and admiring. Reverential or respectful fear. It's not bad to be respectfully afraid of a hurricane. It's a good idea to be afraid of something that could hurt you negatively. It's a good idea to have a fearful respect for a virus and do something good about that. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to be fearful of something bigger than us. The attitude of, I have no idea what that meant. Attitude of a mind subdued to profound reverence in the presence of supreme authority, moral greatness, or mysterious sacredness. We can unpack that later too. To be in the presence of supreme authority, to be in presence of moral greatness, and we're going to look at that more closely as we go, or mysterious sacredness, something real special that we don't quite understand fully. Next slide. The journal articles I looked at told me that awesomeness, awe, reverence, awe, has two ingredients for it in order to strike you with awe. And the first ingredient, it has to have some vastness. It actually has to be rather big. It has to be rather important. It has to be bigger than just you. And each of those words are really important. It has to be bigger than just you. And so the words here are anything experienced as being much, misspelled, much larger or greater than oneself, or one's ordinary level of experience, or one's frame of reference. When I correct a spelling mistake, I want you to know I do the PowerPoint. I wrote it out. It's my spelling mistake. I wasn't suggesting anyone else did it. I did it. So something beyond yourself, something beyond your ordinary level of experience, which unfortunately these days is a bit diminished with lockdown, but beyond your frame of reference, and that can always be expanded. Next slide. The vastness, next, can be disorienting. I only say next because I thought maybe I wasn't heard. I'm certainly not saying Peter isn't here with us. It can be disorienting and it can be even frightening. So I'm asking you to sort of think of an experience. It could be with a storm. It could be with a potential accident. It could be anything that was disorienting to you, frightening at the time. And you felt these words, powerless, small, confused, or dazzled, overcome with joy, or a lightness of being or oneness. All that can be awe. All that can be awe. Next. And the second ingredient, so it has to be big. And the scientists and the psychologists and the philosophers tell us that for the idea of awe, it also has to make some accommodation from you. There has to be some response in you. It's not just that you admire from afar. When you're filled with awe, you have an actual reaction. And you try to make sense of it. The challenge to make sense of an experience of something big, something new, something bigger than you. And it may or not happen, but it's there. The potential for it to do something to you. So we're talking about something big and something that actually moves you in some way. Something happens inside of you because of that. So the next slide puts the two together, vastness and accommodation. And I know this is a bit chewy, but it's really, really interesting. It can come in the way of a threat. The threat can be big and you have a reaction to it. It can come when you see the ability of someone else that's bigger than yours and you're blown away by it. Think of the Olympics. Think of your favorite sport. Think of a craft. When you come along something, Greta and I watched the glass blower competition, and absolutely amazed at the ability of these people to be creative with these things. So anything you've seen that the ability is beyond yours. When I hear piano that plays so immensely, I'm enthralled with it. It's bigger than I can do. And my accommodating, what happens in me is I admire it. I want to listen to it again. And probably one of the bigger ones that affects us a lot, and we mention it a lot at West Hill, is the experience of beauty. Beauty beyond what you expected. Peter came on with some flowers behind him on the screen that were just transporting. And when you go into a garden, or when you see an egg hatching, or when you see something of life that's beautiful, that's beyond you, that's bigger than you, and to have that sense, and now you could even have it on your internet, and you can explore different countries, different aspects of nature, different movies. And when beauty has that awe. So here, and then virtue, when you come into the presence, I do not tend to cry in a movie at something sad. I am struck and I am moved and I'm overcome with the sadness. I cry when I see someone doing something good that they didn't have to do, when they overcome, and when I'm just a mess. I respond that I'm just overcome with that virtue that's just been displayed on the screen that's beyond what I was expecting, beyond what the people were expecting. So virtue can bring that. The next slide puts them together. And the next slide has the idea of a threat is awe with the fear of it. The ability is awe, and I respect that ability. Beauty comes with awe and then pleasure. And virtue comes with awe and then admiration. So I want to spend a moment looking at beauty. Next slide. I was going to say, which I'm doing because I'm looking at all your faces on the screen. So there you go. Looking at beauty. I hope you're having the same feeling when you see us all come on a Sunday morning. So beauty is a sense of awe that brings pleasure and a sense of diminished self, to be lost in wonder and amazement. And I'm wondering if you could right now picture a place you've been, something you've seen, the background you've shown us on your screen, something in nature, something in a person, something beautiful, something tremendous that brought you a sense of awe. Many of you have shared them with us. And because Randy's the reader, I'm going to say he has shared pictures of polar bears, and he has also shared pictures of spiders. Now, not everybody thought the same way about both those types of things, but they were awesome. I think, Randy, would you not agree? They were awesome to you. Awesome. They had that reaction, lost in wonder and amazement. So it has the feeling of both awe and pleasure. And so now I turn to the one that's going to lead us to reverence as well, and that's virtue. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Peter. The idea that the beauty brings that response. Remember, it's the vastness and it's the response. And when you see something beautiful, you can want to have it. You might cut a few of the flowers and put them on your table. You might want to own something beautiful, a pottery. You want to own it and remember who made it. You could also look at a forest and want to protect it. And you could want to preserve something you didn't even know about, a butterfly in the Amazon. might want to share it. You might want to send someone a beautiful picture. Mel sent a picture of Forsythia to me. And so share the beauty. And you might want to experience it again. You might want to go back to where that was and have that immense experience of beauty. So you're seeing something that's bigger than you, and you're responding. And so now, thank you, Peter. I now turn to the virtue in the next slide. Virtue. And this is the last sort of chewy bit from the journal articles I want to share with you. Virtue triggers, evidently, something they call elevation. When you're in the presence of someone's virtue, of someone doing something noble, something kind that they didn't have to do, that brought something new into the situation, that helped, they call it elevation, a response in us to moral beauty. Is that not a great phrase? To moral beauty. And I've had that reaction listening to some of the things you people have done over the years. And now when you respond to human goodness, you have an admiration for it. And the next slide shows that we also have a response to it. And the journal articles over and over again said that in so many times when you're elevated by someone else's moral beauty, a desire flows up in you to become a better person. Something happens in you to say, I want to lead a better life because of what I've just seen. I'm inspired by that person's goodness. So I'm going to ask you, if you could raise your hand, if you've ever been inspired to be better inside and to do better because of seeing someone else, because of hearing something else that someone else did. Have you been inspired by someone else to be better? And so how beautiful is that? And hopefully, that we do that together to be inspired. I should have asked, how many of you have been inspired by beauty alone, by something in nature that inspired you and you wanted to share it and protect it? And if we were in Dennis's background, which was more vocal during a service, our hands are saying amen, or saying so be it, or with it, we're with you on that, and our hands are saying that together. So the desire to be a better person comes when you're in the presence of something bigger than you, someone else's moral beauty that you hadn't seen before. The next slide moves us closer to the word reverence. And I brought awe into there because I want us to go away with a little bigger sense of awe in the things that will elicit that. So self-transcendent experiences, big chewy idea. Transcendent means moving beyond, moving beyond. So self-transcendent is something that takes you beyond just yourself. You're not losing yourself. You didn't go anywhere, but your heart and your mind have seen something, experienced something bigger than you. And that's real healthy. That's really, really healthy. And it also, it connects with things that are beyond us. The word connection, the word interconnectedness came right into our vision works from the very start. To be connected with something bigger than you, to realize you are connected to something bigger than you. And that's why we chose the phrase, the web of life, to realize that you are intimately, integrally, forever connected to the web of life, which is way bigger than you, than all of us together. It's immense. And we're part of that. We're part of that connected to something that's bigger and beyond us, which, as we always say, connects us to that rough stuff going on out there too. We're connected to that too. But we're also connected to the beauty that we just talked about. It's part of you. You're part of it. It's big. You may feel lonely at times, and that's true, and it's real, and it's hard. But underneath that, we are connected to something always that is so much bigger than us. The book I took some of the history from, and I'll show you, it's right here. And the next slide, Peter, is called Reverence, Renewing a Forgotten Virtue. Reverence, Renewing a Forgotten Virtue. And it's by a man named Paul Woodruff, and lots of chapters, lots of history in it, lots of background. And this is his definition of reverence: the well-developed capacity to have the feelings of awe, respect, and shame when these are the right feelings to have. Now, these are Paul's words. These are Woodruff's, Paul's words. And so you might have wondered a bit at the word shame there, and he does develop this. But what he's saying is, in the presence of moral beauty of someone else, sometimes we do get convicted that we didn't do that. And whether you want to use the word shame or guilt or remorse or regret or repentance or all that, I get that a lot. It's a little hard to just see it in his one definition. But the idea is to be in the presence of great moral beauty, words about great moral beauty, an example of moral beauty. We can actually feel self-convicted, which is the best kind of conviction, by the way, when you actually can do it in yourself. But sometimes it's somebody else's words that does it for you, and that's beautiful. You can really resent them for it for about 5 minutes, and then you think, okay, that's good. I needed to hear that. That was good. So when these are the right feelings to have, awe, respect, and even shame. And the next slide, Woodruff goes into some history. So in order not to boggle you, I just put the words there, some history on the screen. But he talks about the Greek culture of reverence, of awe and reverence, that was mainly in a panoply of gods. There were all the different kind of characteristics, all the different kind of qualities, and they were revered. There was reverence for those gods because they believed those gods affected their life. Now, a lot of Greeks in their writing didn't believe it at all, but it was part of their culture and they went with it. Although a lot of people did believe it. And so there was the whole history of giving a sacrifice or doing something so that God who you revered, who had power, who had influence over you, those are all the words we've just been looking at. So we could influence those gods to do something better for us, to take away an illness, to take away a drought or whatever. And so there is reverence for them because they affected us for good or for bad. And he also talked about the Chinese Confucian background, where what was revered was the community, was the family, was the community, because that affected us and we affected it. And we've used those words in our vision works as well, in our thinking about how we ground ourselves, that because the wider family, the community, is affected by something we do, and because the community affects us in our life, the Confucian thing was very much revered, the community and family. And there's lots of other history. If you read that book, there's lots of interesting ways that reverence was dealt with. But I'm going to go to 2, and the next slide has reverence as a sense of wonder that is captured in. Sorry, I got to move things on my little podium here. A sense of wonder, and Randy read it this morning by a man named Richard Powers. Science is not about control. It's about a sense of wonder. It's about reverence, not mastery. And the second idea is that it's not about necessarily it affecting you. It could be affecting other people. The next slide looks at reverence. I hope you're all still with me. Are you still with me? You're still with me. I would ask that. Okay, you're all still with me. What would you say? Would you say no if you just are drifted off? And it's okay if you drift off. But reverence as a sense of reaction and response. And if you can hold that together, because I want this to be something we take away and actually do. Reverence as reaction and response. Next slide puts them together. Reaction and response. Reverence for life. And this is Schweitzer talking. Randy talking and Schweitzer talking. Reverence for life affords me my fundamental principle of morality. He gets it from reverence from life. Next slide. So that makes me realize that as we do at West Hill, the reaction we have to something gets there. It's elicited by whatever our worldview is and whatever our values, and it actually reveals them. What you hold in reverence, in respect, in admiration, in something you treasure, says a lot about your values. That's where it comes from. Your values lead you to reverence something or respect something or admire something or want to emulate something. So your values are there. And the next part, next slide, is that your response to them is directed by the same thing. What you believe about life, if you would embrace the idea that it's interconnected and what your values are, compassion, justice, kindness, reverence will show in that. What you will reverence, if someone were watching what you would reverence, they would see your values. they would see it in your reactions and your responses. I love that. I love that. We don't use the word enough, reverence, but what it's saying is what's important, what you value, what gets your attention, your preservation, your protection, your support, your vote, your choice in shop. What gets that is what you revere, is what you hold as worthy, and your values come out in that beautiful. So the next slide, I put the idea together that reverence is sorry, that's great. That's the combination of that. So go on to the next one, Peter. Active reverence. And that's what I'm wanting us to think about as we go into our week, and whatever that week is. To reverence something. I put it sort of like a verb. To reverence something as having value. To reverence something as having value. To realize that you're revering it, you're holding it up, you're saying it is important, and it affects what we do and what we choose. So to reverence something is what I want to hold on to. Next slide, Peter. So active reverence, to see through the lens of our values, to look out into the world, to look on this screen, to look at a family member, to look at your backyard, to look at a forest, to look at a news report about people suffering, to look at that through the lens of our values is a reverence. We're not just looking at it blankly or neutrally. We are looking with our values. And then to respond to that, motivated by our values. So I just see this idea of our values affecting how we see and how we act in terms of the word value. There's nothing really new in what we're saying here, but to attach it to the value, to the word reverence, gave it a real depth to me as I was working through this. And so now I have some pictures. If you saw my e-blast, I said you would get some very nice pictures. So here's the very nice pictures with a quote to go on with them. And these are examples of what people have used the word reverence for. So I'll very quickly describe the picture for those of you that don't have the picture. But the second reading, first reading that Randy gave us was saying that John Steinbeck held human history in great reverence, in particular, the biographies of people that worked for justice for those who had no voice. So to have reverence for people working for justice. What a beautiful thing. There's a woman there and she's holding a sign that says justice for, and it's a blank with exclamation marks. And under it, she says, I left it blank because it'll probably be used, we'll need the sign next year because there's always going to be something else to stand for. So for all the people working for justice, including this woman on the screen and all the people that read her sign and said amen to it, to have reverence for that, to see it reverently with admiration, with preservation, with helpfulness. The next slide. This is a quote from a teacher named Nancy Gibbs. I don't know who she is, but she wrote this. I come from a family of teachers. I believe ideas matter. The good ones deserve reverence. The bad ones deserve defiance. And so there's a sticky notes, which how many of you have taken part in something like this where you put your ideas on the wall? And that's the ideas that are good deserve our reverence. Never thought about it that way. To hold someone's really good idea with respect and admiration is a reverence. Next picture. We're familiar with this. Stuart Udall said, the most common trait of all primitive peoples is a reverence for the life-giving earth. The Native Americans shared this elemental ethic, that the land was alive to his or her loving touch, and he or her, its son and daughter, was brother and sister to all creatures. Now, I took the picture on Unsplash of this earth, and I very cleverly flipped it so it was upside down, so we didn't see it as we usually see it. And I love that, because probably you looked at it and was trying to figure out where that was on the globe, and that's a good thing. And the next picture I included with that, a reverence for Earth. And I love that picture because there's all the countries and the nationals. And if anyone thinks they've got it all in their hand, this picture is saying we don't. So a reverence for the countries, the nationalities, those marks that weren't on the first globe, to realize that we are very small in that, and it deserves a reverent approach to all those divisions. Next slide. Frank Lloyd Wright said, Frank Lloyd Wright, a very, very famous architect, he said, respect the masterpiece. It is true reverence to human ability. There is no quality so great, none so much needed now, as a reverent approach to what we build. Hadn't heard reverence attached to that, but what a beautiful thing. Next slide. Robert Andrews, don't know who he is, but he said this: fullness of knowledge always means some understanding of the depths of our ignorance. And that is always conducive to humility and to reverence. Gad Saad also said, my personal growth stems from the humility with which I navigate the world, namely with a reverence for all the knowledge that I've yet to learn, but is out there available to me. So I got this picture of a library I found one with a light on. I thought that was great. So all the knowledge we don't have yet, but someone else has had it, or the knowledge that we don't even have yet and will be written. And I like that picture of someone perusing, obviously needs his glasses off to read, which I relate with. And he's looking for knowledge, and that's a reverence. And the next slide, I love this one. I love them all. Pythagoras, a long time ago in Greek culture, said, above all things, reverence yourself. It was very difficult finding a picture of a mirror that didn't have something reflected in it. And that was going to be an obstruction to this. So I looked at it, and dozens of mirrors to put on this. And then I found this one, and I found it because it doesn't have anything reflected in it. And I sat and looked, and I thought, well, of course it does. It can't not have something reflected in it. It has the opposite wall, which happens to be white. So even this, when you're looking at your mirror, that's what Pythagoras is saying. Have a reverence for yourself. And if you see someone else in the mirror and they're looking at it, to wish that they would see the same thing. And the last picture, a man named Seamus Heaney said, eternal life, which has all sorts of history to it, eternal life can mean utter reverence for life itself. What an interesting way to look at eternal life, that it's an eternal reverence that you carry through your lifetime. And I love that neon sign. You're here. Here you are here in life. And can that bring a reverence from you for life itself, which that writer was equating with eternal life, rich, full, never-ending idea of life to reverence. So the last slide, and you've come with me all this way. I know some of this was a bit chewy. I found it a bit chewy, but the idea of reverence, by practicing reverence for life, Schweitzer says, we become good and deep and alive. And the word I wanted to highlight there was practicing. And so I just suggest this to you. It meant a lot to me to take the word reverence out of a particular religion. You can put it right back there if you wish, but to take it out of where it's often used and put it where Schweitzer used for life itself, and then brought the idea of practicing it. So if you can picture right now, those things we just went through, those different ways of bringing reverence to life, that you would reverence ideas that are good, that are worthy of being reverenced, that you would reverence the earth itself and all that life on it, which is such a big idea squished into one of my sentences here, that you would reverence the work of human hands, whether it's Frank Lloyd Wright or a potter or a child making a picture that goes on your fridge, that the masterpiece, that you would reverence knowledge and you would reverence that there's so much knowledge we don't have yet. And you would hold that with respect and admiration, that you would reverence yourself more deeply than ever before because of the wonder, the beauty, the amazement that you're alive and that you're breathing. Some with difficulty, I say that with total respect. and that you reverence life itself. So the next thing you do when you turn off your screens and we've said goodbye to each other, you're walking back into the non-Zoom screen life, or some of you are going on to another Zoom. I know Kathy and Doug go right to more connections with family, but that you have a sense of that to revere, which doesn't mean you can't confront someone with something that's wrong. That's actually part of reverence and how you do it. But to lift up the preciousness of life, the preciousness of all those things we just mentioned, is a beautiful thing. And I'm going to ask Peter to put, this is a song that's got the word awesome in it. And I invite you, Babette and I recorded it when we didn't have the better equipment to do so. So we both are saying to you, this isn't the best recording of it, but I thought it was worth it to sing. And I happen to know that there's a fellow in Scotland that calls it one of his favorites. So he must sing with gusto now, John. But this is a song that raises up everything we've just been talking about, to revere, to reverence, to realize the awesomeness in it. So I invite you, Peter, thank you for putting that on the screen. And you're welcome to sing along if you mute yourself, and just enjoy the words if it's new to you. So thank you, Babette, for recording. Thank you, Babette. I just want you to know that they might have to repair the ceiling a little bit because Glenn and I raised the rafters here singing this with great gusto. So go with reverence.
Scott?
Yep. Yes.
I just want to, I know this is not part of the script.
You're welcome to join.
But based on the reaction, both personal and the community that's here today, thank you very much. I got a lot more than I was expecting out of the word reverence. And it's greatly appreciated. I would also like just to take 2 seconds to share something that you brought to my attention. And I don't know if you can see this picture.
Beautiful.
That is the cover of the 240-page book that Laura has put together from our Greenland Labrador trip.
Whoa.
While you were talking, I kept thinking about this picture. And this is a picture of Roma Bay in the Torngat Mountain National Park. We were there in 2017. There are roughly between 200 and 300 people that visit there every year. It is far, standing at the top and taking this picture was totally awesome, because there was such beauty and understanding that it was also an archaeological dig, and it was also being managed both by the provincial, federal, and Indigenous people for the future. And for me, that's kind of the total reverence that you help bring out of the back of my head to the front of my head. So thank you very much on behalf of the congregation.
Privilege and pleasure. And yes, if it reminds you of other things, please send them in. Let us know. Let us know something that aroused reverence and something that you chose to attribute reverence to move it with reverence, and then do something beautiful about it. So, and Laura made a book of it, which is beautiful and to be shared. Thank you all. Have a beautiful week. Join us on Tuesday for wellness. Join us on Wednesday for the book study. Join us on Thursday for coffee with Mike and everyone. And join us next Sunday back here. Let it be known that you're on this, and share it with friends. There's a few more screens that we can fill, like maybe 500. You're welcome to bring whoever you want along with you. Have a good week. Be safe, be healthy, be reverent.
Thank you, Scott.
Welcome.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott. Welcome. More than welcome.
You're awesome, Scott. Thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. So are you.
And you're awful too.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you. So are you. So are you. You're just as awful as me. My goodness. Beautiful.